She had been sitting there for 47 minutes. The coffee in front of her had gone cold twice. Outside the frost-etched windows of the Maple Corner, Christmas lights blinked their steady pattern along Newberry Street. Red, gold, green, repeat. Each cycle marking another 60 seconds of waiting. Inside, silence pressed against her shoulders like judgment. Rachel Whitmore adjusted the sleeve of her Max Mara cashmere coat, $3,200 of charcoal gray wool that somehow couldn't protect her from the pitying glances. The Cartier tank on her wrist read 8:07 p.m. Her phone screen showed no new messages. Just the photo Linda had sent 3 days ago. A man with tired eyes and a little girl whose smile hadn't learned to hold anything back. The barista approached for the third time, a kid maybe 22 with a nose ring and flannel that had seen too many wash cycles. He set down another cup without asking. His eyes said what his mouth wouldn't. Even women who could buy this entire block still got stood up on Christmas Eve. Rachel wrapped both hands around the ceramic. Warmth spread through her palms, traveled up her wrists, stopped somewhere around her chest where it couldn't reach the cold that had settled in 4 months ago when Alexander walked out of their penthouse with 2 suitcases and a forwarding address. The couple at the next table stood to leave. In the silence that followed their departure, Rachel became aware of her own heartbeat. Too fast, too loud. The rhythm of someone who had forgotten how to sit still without checking email, without returning calls, without being 10 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. She checked her phone again. Nothing. 47 minutes of her life she would never recover. Sitting in a cafe that probably didn't even know her name, waiting for a stranger Linda swore would be different. Better. Good. Good. Rachel turned the word over in her mind like a stone she'd found on a beach somewhere. Smooth and ordinary and impossible to hold on to for long. When had she stopped believing in good? Somewhere between her third promotion and her divorce papers, probably. Somewhere in the 15 years she'd spent climbing from secretary to CEO, transforming her dead father's work ethic and her mother's 3 jobs into an empire Alexander's family name had merely introduced her to. The lights outside blurred. Snow had started falling harder now, accumulating on the window ledge in drifts that would be gone by morning. Temporary, like everything else. Rachel's phone buzzed. Her chest tightened before she could stop it, hope flaring like a match in wind, but the screen showed only her assistant. Board meeting confirmed for Monday, December 30th, 2 p.m. James Whitmore will be in attendance. Of course he would. Alexander's father hadn't missed a chance to remind her whose company this really was since the divorce. Never mind that she'd tripled revenue in 7 years. Never mind that Fortune called her the most powerful woman in Boston. Blood mattered more than balance sheets to men like James. She typed back, "Confirm European expansion on agenda. Full presentation ready." Then she set the phone face down on the table and stared at the door. Logic said to leave. She had a company to run, a crisis simmering just below the surface after her CFO leaked numbers to the wrong journalist. A future that required every ounce of focus she possessed. Logic said standing up and walking out would preserve what remained of her dignity, but something kept her in that chair. Maybe it was Linda's voice on the phone 2 months ago, gentle but firm in that way only friends from college could manage. "You need to try, Rachel. Just try. You've been running so fast for so long you forgot how to stand still. He's not what you're used to, but he's good." Maybe it was the memory of Alexander's last words, still lodged between her ribs like shrapnel she couldn't extract. "You never waited for anything, Claire. Not for me. Not for us. You were always 10 steps ahead, and I was tired of chasing, tired of..." Maybe it was the simple, humiliating truth that she had nowhere else to be. The penthouse would be empty except for the 8-foot Christmas tree her decorator had installed, elegant and impersonal as a hotel lobby. The friends she'd accumulated over the years were really Alexander's friends, their invitations drying up the moment the divorce became final. Even her mother was spending Christmas in Florida with Rachel's brother, leaving her daughter to the life she'd built. Successful, solitary, and colder than the December wind rattling the cafe windows. So Rachel sat and waited, and tried not to calculate how many emails she could have answered in 47 minutes, how many decisions she could have made, how many steps ahead she could have moved. The door opened at 8:17 p.m. Cold air rushed in first, carrying snow and the smell of car exhaust from Newbury Street. Then he followed, a man who looked like he'd fought through hell to get there and barely won. His Carhartt jacket was soaked through, the brown canvas turned black with water. His jeans were splattered with slush, the kind that accumulated on Boston sidewalks when snow mixed with salt and exhaust and became something gray and gritty. His work boots left wet prints on the hardwood floor. His hair, dark, longer than fashion dictated, was plastered to his forehead and dripping. He stood in the doorway breathing hard, scanning the room with the desperate urgency of someone who'd run out of time and options. When his eyes found hers, Rachel saw something that made her forget about the cold coffee and the pitying barista and the 47 minutes of wondering if she'd been foolish to come. Relief, pure, unguarded relief that she was still there. He crossed the cafe in quick strides. People turned to look, not with admiration, but with puzzled curiosity. His jacket was the kind sold at Home Depot for $89. His boots were Red Wings, good quality but worn down at the heels. He didn't belong in the Maple Corner, with its artisanal pastries and oat milk lattes. He didn't belong in her world, but he was here anyway. The words tumbled out before he'd fully stopped moving. "I'm so sorry. I'm Michael. My daughter was sick. I couldn't." He stopped mid-sentence as if suddenly realizing he was dripping onto someone's carefully maintained floor. Water pooled around his boots. His chest heaved with exertion or emotion or both. Up close, Rachel could see the exhaustion carved into the corners of his eyes. He smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender, the latter probably children's soap. Rachel stood, her heels put her almost eye level with him, close enough to see that the water on his face wasn't all melted snow. Some of it came from inside. Her voice emerged cooler than she intended, professional and guarded, and everything she'd learned to be in boardrooms where showing weakness meant losing ground. "It's fine. I understand." Michael's gaze dropped to the 2 coffee cups on the table. One cold, one cooling, then returned to her face. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude, or just exhaustion finally catching up. "You waited." 2 words, statement or question. Rachel couldn't tell. "I did." Michael pulled out the chair across from her but didn't sit. He stood there holding the back of it like a man who'd forgotten how furniture worked, or maybe one who'd learned not to take up space he hadn't been invited into. Why? The question landed between them with the weight of something that mattered. Most people would have laughed it off, made some joke about having nothing better to do on Christmas Eve. Most people would have smoothed over the rawness with small talk or false modesty, or any of the 1,000 social graces that kept conversations from cutting too close to truth. But Michael just stood there, water dripping from his sleeves, waiting for an answer. Rachel sat back down. After a moment, he followed, moving carefully as if the chair might break under ordinary weight. "I don't know." It was the most honest thing she'd said to anyone in months. The barista appeared with a towel, the same kid who'd brought her the pity coffee. He handed it to Michael without a word. The simple gesture contained more kindness than Rachel had received from most people who knew her name. "Thank you." Michael said it like he meant it, like those 2 words mattered as much as the towel itself. He dried his face, his hands, the back of his neck where water had soaked through his collar. His fingers were calloused, working hands, the kind that fixed things, built things, knew how to be useful in ways Rachel had forgotten existed. She found herself studying those hands as he folded the towel and set it on the table's edge. Alexander's hands had been soft, manicured, the hands of a man who signed papers and shook hands and never touched anything that might leave a mark. "How's your daughter?" The question seemed to surprise him. Maybe because it was the right one, maybe because most people would have led with something safer. "She's okay, high fever, 104, but it broke about an hour ago. She's home now." "Sleeping?" Michael's jaw tightened. "I tried to text you. The signal in the ER waiting room is terrible." ER, emergency room. The words reorganized everything Rachel had been thinking for the past 47 minutes. The annoyance, the wounded pride, the careful calculation of whether this was worth her time, all of it shifted into something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like shame. "You were at the hospital." "Yeah." He picked up the menu, set it down again. His hands were shaking, just slightly. The adrenaline wearing off, probably. Or fear catching up now that the crisis had passed. I thought about canceling, but Emma, that's my daughter, she told me I should come. She said, Michael stopped, laughed once, a sound without humor. She said you might be nice. Am I? Rachel asked it before she could stop herself, before she could remember that she was Rachel Whitmore, CEO, Forbes 40 under 40, woman who didn't need validation from strangers in wet jackets. Michael looked at her then, really looked at her, not at the Max Mara coat or the Cartier watch or the Hermes bag sitting on the chair beside her, not at the armor she'd spent 15 years polishing until it reflected nothing but success back at the world. He looked at her like he was trying to see past all of it to whatever lived underneath. I don't know yet. His voice was quiet, careful. But you waited, so maybe. The couple at the far table got up to leave. In the brief silence that followed their departure, Rachel became aware of how loud her heartbeat sounded in her own ears. She reached for her coffee, the second one still warm, and took a sip. Someone had added sugar without asking. Too much sugar. She drank it anyway. Linda said you're a plumber. I am. Do you like it? Michael's mouth twitched, almost a smile. It pays the bills, keeps Sophie fed. Sophie, not Emma. Rachel filed the correction away, noted how easily he'd said the wrong name. How tired he must be to slip like that. That's what matters. That's not what you asked. He leaned back in his chair. Some of the tension left his shoulders, or maybe it just redistributed itself into different muscles. Outside, snow was falling harder now, turning Newberry Street into something softer and quieter than the daytime version of itself. No, it's not what I'd choose if I had a choice, but I do it well, and people need me, so that counts for something. Rachel thought about her own work, the acquisitions and mergers, the strategic decisions that moved millions of dollars from one column to another, the board meetings where she defended territory Alexander's father still believed belonged to his family by right of blood. Did people need her, or did they just need what she could do for them? What would you choose if you had a choice? Michael was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Rachel thought he might not answer, long enough that she became aware of the Christmas music playing somewhere in the background, something instrumental and nostalgic that probably meant something to someone. I used to be an architect. The words came slowly, like he was excavating them from somewhere deep. Designed houses, mostly. Custom builds. I liked the idea of creating spaces where people could be happy. And why did you stop? His voice didn't change, but Rachel saw his jaw tighten. My wife got sick. Cancer. By the time she was gone, I had medical bills totaling $300,000. I've been paying them down for 3 years. Still owe about $180,000. But plumbing pays better than entry-level architecture, and I could start right away. So I did. Rachel set her cup down carefully. I'm sorry. Don't be, it was 3 years ago. We're okay now, Sophie and me. He said it like he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Like if he repeated it enough times, it might become true. The barista came by again, this time with a notepad. Michael ordered water. Just water. Rachel watched his eyes skip over the menu, avoiding the prices, and something in her chest tightened. Get something to eat, please. I'm fine. I know you're fine. Get something to eat anyway. They looked at each other across the small table. Two strangers negotiating the strange territory of care offered and received. Finally, Michael nodded. Turkey and Swiss. The cheapest sandwich on the menu. Rachel knew because she'd studied it during her first 20 minutes of waiting, calculating cost per item the way she calculated everything else. Old habits from Worcester, from watching her mother work 3 jobs, from the scholarship girl at MIT who'd learned to stretch every dollar until it screamed. When the barista left, silence settled over them again, but it felt different now, less awkward, more substantial, like they were building something between them, brick by brick, and the silence was just another brick. You didn't have to do that. Michael's voice was low. I can pay for myself. I know that too. He studied her for a moment. Rachel had the unsettling feeling that he could see straight through every defense she'd ever built, that the walls she'd constructed between herself and the world were transparent to someone like him, Someone who'd learned to see what mattered by losing what didn't. Why did you really wait? The question again. Different this time. Deeper. Rachel thought about the last 4 months. The divorce proceedings conducted through lawyers because she and Alexander couldn't be in the same room without one of them leaving. The empty penthouse where she woke up every morning forgetting, just for a second, that there was no one beside her anymore. The morning she stood in front of her closet choosing armor for the day ahead, power suit, heels, watch, bag, each piece a reminder of who she'd become and what it had cost. She thought about Alexander's voice the night he'd left. You're always moving, Rachel, always planning, always 10 steps ahead, but you never stopped to see that I wasn't keeping up, that I'd stopped trying. She thought about her mother's voice on the phone last week. You sound tired, honey. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Not because it would help the company or impress the board, but just because it made you happy. Rachel hadn't had an answer then, but maybe she had one now. I think I was hoping someone would wait for me, too. The words came out quieter than she'd intended, more vulnerable. But Michael didn't flinch or look away or do any of the things people usually did when offered something true. He just nodded, like he understood exactly what she meant. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen. His whole face softened in a way that made Rachel's throat tighten. It's Sophie, he said it almost apologetically. Like taking a call from his 7-year-old daughter might somehow be rude. He swiped to answer and Rachel heard a small, hoarse voice on the other end. Daddy? Hey, baby, you okay? Yeah, I took my medicine. When are you coming home? Michael's thumb traced the edge of his phone, an unconscious gesture probably. Something he did when he was trying to hold himself together. Soon, real soon. Is the lady nice? Rachel felt her throat constrict. The casual way Sophie asked it, like this was normal. Like her father going on dates was something she'd gotten used to, or maybe something she'd been hoping for. A 7-year-old girl worrying about whether her father had found someone nice. Michael's eyes flicked to Rachel. For a moment, she saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. Fear, maybe, or hope, or the terrible space between the two. Very nice. His voice was soft, careful, like the words were something fragile he was trying not to break. Good. You deserve someone nice, Daddy. Rachel looked away, focused on the Christmas lights outside blinking their steady rhythm. Red, gold, green, red, gold, green. She'd watched that pattern for 47 minutes earlier, each cycle marking time she'd never get back. Now she watched it mark something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. I'll be home in a bit, okay? Okay, you need anything? No, I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm okay, sweetheart. I promise. Okay, love you. Love you too. Michael ended the call and set the phone face down on the table. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Rachel didn't push. She understood somehow that this silence was its own kind of conversation. Sorry I called her Emma earlier. That's her best friend from school. My brain's not working right. Been up since 5 this morning. He rubbed his face with both hands. She worries about me. The words finally came quiet and heavy. She's 7 years old and she worries about me. That's not how it's supposed to work. She loves you. I know, but sometimes I think she'd be better off if I could give her more. A real house instead of a 2-bedroom apartment. A mom who's actually there instead of just a memory she's starting to forget. He stopped, shook his head like he was trying to dislodge something stuck inside. Sorry, you didn't sign up for this. Didn't I? Rachel kept her voice gentle. Linda said you were a good father. She didn't mention anything else. What else is there? The question hung between them, simple and devastating. Rachel thought about all the things she used to believe mattered. The corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The 7-figure salary that finally meant her mother could stop worrying about money. The invitations to galas and fundraisers, all those glittering events where everyone smiled and no one was happy. What else is there? The barista brought Michael's sandwich. He ate slowly, methodically, like someone who'd learned not to waste food. Rachel watched without meaning to, noticed the way he wiped his mouth with a napkin after every few bites. The way he said thank you when the barista refilled his water. Small things, ordinary things. Things Alexander had stopped doing somewhere along the way, or maybe had never done at all. Can I ask you something? Michael set down what remained of his sandwich, the last quarter, carefully preserved. Go ahead. Why are you here, really? He gestured vaguely at her coat, her watch, the bag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A woman like you could be anywhere, doing anything. Why a blind date with a plumber on Christmas Eve? Rachel considered lying. It would be easy. She could say she was bored, curious, doing Linda a favor. All technically true, but none of them the truth that mattered. But something about the way Michael was looking at her, patient, open, waiting, made the truth feel less dangerous than usual. Because I'm tired of being alone, and I'm tired of pretending I'm not. Michael nodded slowly, like this was an answer that made sense to him, like maybe he understood loneliness in a way most people didn't. Yeah, I get that. Do you? He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a piece of paper folded carefully into quarters, smoothed it on the table between them. Sophie drew me a picture this morning. She wanted me to bring it, for luck, she said. Rachel leaned forward. The drawing was simple. Stick figures in crayon. A man and a woman holding hands. Above them, Sophie had written in wobbly letters, Daddy and his new friend, Merry Christmas. There was a small smudge in the corner, like someone had cried and tried to wipe it away. She wants you to be happy. Rachel's voice came out quieter than she'd intended. She wants me to have what she can't give me. Michael's voice was steady, but Rachel heard the fracture beneath it. She's 7 years old and she thinks it's her job to fix me. Rachel's hand moved before she could think about it, reached across the table to touch his wrist, just briefly, just enough to ground him in something other than whatever was pulling him under. You're not broken. How do you know? His eyes met hers, direct, unflinching, the kind of eye contact that demanded truth. Because broken people don't show up 47 minutes late to a blind date and still apologize. Michael almost smiled at that, almost. The corner of his mouth lifted just enough to suggest the shape of it, then settled back into something more careful. I should go. Sophie's alone. I don't like leaving her too long, even when she's sleeping. I understand. He stood, pulled out his wallet. Rachel watched him count bills carefully. The worn leather of the wallet creased and soft from years of use. The methodical way he made sure he had enough for the sandwich, the water, a tip for the kid with the nose ring who had brought him a towel. Thank you for waiting. His voice was quiet, sincere. I know it probably seemed... Don't, Rachel interrupted gently. Don't apologize again. You're here, that's what matters. Michael tucked Sophie's drawing back into his pocket. Rachel felt a sudden, irrational urge to ask him to stay, just a little longer. Just until the snow stopped, or the cafe closed, or she could figure out why this felt different from every other first date she'd ever had. Can I? He stopped, started again. Can I see you again? Or was this enough? Rachel stood, gathered her coat, her purse, her carefully constructed composure, all the pieces of armor she'd put on this morning in her penthouse, preparing for disappointment she'd assume was inevitable. Do you have plans for the rest of the night? Michael blinked. Just going home, to Sophie. The words tumbled out before Rachel could catch them. Can I come with you? The question surprised them both. Michael's eyes widened. Rachel felt heat rise in her cheeks, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. The unguarded flush of asking for something she wanted without calculating the cost first. I don't mean... She started to backtrack, but Michael held up a hand. I know what you mean. He hesitated. Rachel watched him work through whatever calculations he was running. The late hour, the sick daughter, the stranger asking to enter his home, his life, the careful space he'd built around the two of them. Sophie said she wanted to bake cookies tonight. She's probably too sick. But if you don't mind, I'd like that. Rachel meant it. Couldn't remember the last time she'd meant something this completely. Without reservation or calculation, or the careful hedging she'd learned in boardrooms where certainty was weakness. I'd really like that. They walked out into the snow together, side by side but not touching. The cold hit Rachel's face like a blessing, sharp and clean and real. She pulled her coat tighter and thought about the penthouse waiting for her in Back Bay. The empty rooms and the decorator's Christmas tree, elegant and impersonal as a magazine spread. The life she'd built that suddenly felt too small to contain her. Michael led her to a bus stop, the number 47. Rachel couldn't remember the last time she'd taken public transportation. Her driver usually waited wherever she needed him, black town car idling at the curb, ready to carry her from one climate-controlled space to another. They boarded and moved toward the back. Through fogged windows, Rachel watched the city slide past, storefronts closing for the night, streetlights haloed with falling snow. The occasional glimpse of families gathered around dinner tables, visible through ground floor windows like scenes from someone else's life. Michael didn't try to fill the silence with small talk. Rachel was grateful for that. She needed the quiet to process what she was doing. Following a stranger to his home on Christmas Eve because a 7-year-old had drawn a picture and a barista had brought her free coffee. The bus lurched to a stop on a street Rachel didn't recognize. Dorchester, probably. She'd seen the neighborhood on maps, driven through it on the way to somewhere else, but never stopped. Never had a reason to. This is us. Michael stood. Rachel followed him off the bus and onto a sidewalk, still being cleared, salt crunching under her heels. The building was old but well kept. Red brick with white shutters. A row of mailboxes by the front door with names written in faded marker. The kind of place where people stayed for years, not the luxury high-rises, where Rachel's neighbors changed every 6 months and no one learned names. They climbed to the second floor. The stairs were narrow and the wood creaked under their feet. The hallway smelled like someone had been cooking pot roast, a homey smell. Comforting in a way Rachel's penthouse with its marble countertops and stainless steel appliances could never be. Michael unlocked number 2B and stepped inside. Rachel followed. The apartment was small, living room flowing into kitchen, a hallway leading to what must be 2 bedrooms. But warm, that was the first word that came to mind. Not expensive, not impressive, just warm. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, not the 8-foot professional job Rachel's decorator had installed. This one was maybe 5 feet tall, decorated with ornaments that looked handmade. Construction paper snowflakes, popsicle stick reindeer. A star on top fashioned from aluminum foil that caught the light and scattered it across the ceiling. And on the couch, curled under a blanket, was Sophie. She was small for 7, dark hair falling across her face, cheeks still flushed with fever. The TV was on, some cartoon with bright colors and cheerful music, but her eyes were closed. Michael crossed the room and knelt beside him, pressed the back of his hand to her forehead the way Rachel's mother used to do when she was young. Before her father died and her mother had to work 3 jobs and there wasn't time for sick days or gentle hands checking temperatures. Still warm. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. He adjusted the blanket, tucked it around Sophie's shoulders. When he stood, his expression was softer than Rachel had seen all night. Pride and grief and hope all tangled together in a way that made her chest ache. She's beautiful. Rachel kept her voice low, matching his. Michael looked at his daughter with something that went beyond love. Something Rachel recognized even if she didn't fully understand it. The way someone looked at the most important thing in their world. The thing they'd sacrifice anything for. The thing that made breathing worthwhile. She looks like her mom. Same hair, same stubborn chin. Sophie stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. Confusion first, then recognition. Then a smile, sleepy and genuine and so completely trusting that Rachel felt something crack open in her chest. Daddy, you're back. I'm back, baby. Sophie's gaze shifted to Rachel. No shyness, no hesitation. Just curiosity lighting up her fever-bright eyes. Are you Daddy's friend? Rachel moved closer, knelt so she was at Sophie's level, remembering something her mother once told her about talking to children. How you had to make yourself small so they wouldn't have to make themselves big. I hope so. I'm Rachel. I'm Sophie. The little girl coughed, a rough sound that made Michael wince. Did Daddy show you my picture? He did. It's beautiful. Sophie's smile widened, transforming her face. Do you like cookies? I do. Good, because Daddy said we could bake some tonight, but I don't think I can get up. She looked at Michael, apologetic in the way children were when their bodies betrayed them, when being sick felt like failing somehow. I'm sorry, Daddy. Michael sat on the edge of the couch, brushing hair from Sophie's face with the kind of tenderness that came from practice, from doing this every day, from being both mother and father to a child who'd lost one and needed the other to somehow fill both roles. Hey, you don't apologize for being sick. We'll bake cookies another time. But it's Christmas Eve. Sophie's lower lip trembled. Rachel saw Michael's resolve waver, watched him try to balance what his daughter wanted against what she needed, the impossible calculation every parent made 1,000 times a day. Rachel stood, crossed to the small kitchen that was really just an extension of the living room, opened the fridge and found butter, eggs, a half-empty bag of flour in the cupboard, sugar in a container that had definitely seen better days. What if, she turned back to them, what if we bake cookies here? Sophie can tell us what to do. We'll do the work. That way she can still be part of it. Sophie's eyes lit up, literally lit up, like someone had flipped a switch behind her face. Michael looked at Rachel like she'd just offered him something he didn't know he needed, something he didn't know he was allowed to want. You don't have to. I want to. Rachel cut him off gently, and she did want to. Couldn't explain why exactly. Maybe it was the way Sophie looked at her father, like he'd hung the moon and stars and was personally responsible for making sure they stayed up there. Maybe it was the homemade Christmas tree and the smell of pot roast lingering in the hallway. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in months, years maybe, Rachel felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. I really want to. They baked cookies. Sophie directed from the couch, her voice hoarse but determined. Each instruction delivered with the absolute authority of a 7-year-old who knew exactly how cookies should be made and wasn't about to compromise. More sugar, Daddy. No, more than that. And Miss Rachel, you have to crack the eggs with one hand or it's bad luck. Rachel had never cracked an egg with one hand in her life. At home, she had a chef who prepared meals she rarely ate. At restaurants, she had waiters who brought food she barely tasted. Eggs were something that appeared on plates, fully formed, their origins mysterious as everything else she consumed. The first one shattered, shell and yolk mixing together in a mess that made Sophie giggle, a sound like bells Rachel wanted to capture and keep. It's okay. Try again. The second one worked. Barely. The yolk stayed mostly intact and only a few pieces of shell made it into the bowl. Rachel looked up and found Michael watching her from across the counter. He was smiling. A real smile this time. One that reached his eyes and carved lines around his mouth that probably meant he used to smile more often. Before his wife died. Before medical bills and single parenthood and working a job he didn't love to keep a daughter he loved more than breathing. They worked together without discussing it. Michael measured while Rachel mixed. Somewhere along the way, flour ended up on his shirt, butter smeared on her sleeve, ruining cashmere that cost more than his monthly rent probably. Sophie laughed at them both and the sound filled the small apartment like light. When the first batch came out of the oven, the cookies were misshapen and slightly burned on the edges. Perfect, according to Sophie. She was the expert after all. The final authority on what constituted cookie perfection. Michael brought her one, still warm enough to hurt if you weren't careful. Sophie took a small bite, chewed thoughtfully, then handed it to Rachel. You tray. Rachel took the cookie, bit into it, too sweet, slightly underbaked in the middle where the dough was still soft. The best thing she'd tasted in years. Good? Sophie's eyes were wide, seeking approval or maybe confirmation that the world still made sense. That cookies could still taste like they should. That Christmas Eve could still feel like it was supposed to. Perfect. Rachel said it and meant it. Sophie's smile was radiant. She looked at Michael, then back at Rachel. Something shifted in her expression. Something Rachel couldn't quite read but felt all the way down to her bones. Can Miss Rachel stay for Christmas? The question landed like a stone in still water. Ripples spreading outward, touching everything. Michael froze. Rachel felt her heart skip, then raced to catch up. Sophie? Michael's voice was gentle. Miss Rachel probably has plans. I don't. The words came out before Rachel could stop them, before she could remember that she was supposed to be CEO Rachel Whitmore, woman who always had plans, who scheduled her life in 15-minute increments and never deviated from the agenda. I don't have plans. Sophie sat up straight, wincing slightly at the effort. So you can stay? Rachel thought about her penthouse, about the corporate retreat she was supposed to be planning, about the PR crisis waiting in her inbox, about James Whitmore and the board meeting on the 27th, about all the reasons she should say no, should maintain boundaries, should remember who she was and what she had to lose. I'd like that. The words came out quiet but firm. I'd really like that. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Before Rachel could ask if something hurt, if the fever was back, if she needed medicine or water or her father, the little girl had her arms around Rachel's neck, hugging her with fierce, desperate strength that seemed impossible from someone so small and sick. Thank you. Sophie's whisper was hot against Rachel's ear. Daddy needs someone. He won't say it, but he does. Rachel held her carefully, like something precious that might break if she squeezed too hard. Over Sophie's shoulder, she saw Michael standing in the kitchen, one hand pressed flat against the counter, eyes closed, jaw tight. When he opened his eyes, there were tears on his face. He didn't try to hide them or wipe them away, just stood there letting them fall, his chest rising and falling with breaths that looked like they hurt. Okay. His voice was rough, raw. Okay. Sophie released Rachel and Swan sank back into the couch cushions, exhausted from that brief burst of energy. Michael crossed the room and knelt beside his daughter, checked her forehead again, adjusted her blanket. All the small rituals of care he'd probably done 1,000 times since becoming the only parent she had left. Fever's down, she'll be okay. He said it to Rachel, but she wondered if he was really talking to himself, making promises he hoped he could keep, that his daughter would be okay, that they would be okay, that somehow, despite everything, they would find a way through. Good. Rachel didn't know what else to say, didn't trust herself to say anything more complicated than that one syllable of agreement. Michael came to stand beside her by the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, real and solid and present in a way nothing else in her life had been for a long time. I don't know what we're doing. His voice was quiet, for her ears only, but I'm glad you're here. Rachel turned to face him, looked up at this man who'd shown up 47 minutes late with wet shoes and a sick daughter, and somehow made her feel more seen than anyone had in years. Me too. The admission felt dangerous, like stepping off solid ground into water that might be deep or shallow, warm or freezing. No way to know until you were already in. But Rachel was tired of solid ground, tired of knowing exactly where she stood at every moment, tired of being CEO Rachel Whitmore, woman who never took risks she hadn't calculated first. So she stayed. In the small apartment in Dorchester, with its creaking floors and handmade Christmas tree, with a man she'd known for less than 3 hours and a little girl who'd decided Rachel belonged here. In this space they'd carved out of grief and determination and love, too fierce to be contained. She stayed, and in staying felt something shift. Not certainty, not answers, just the beginning of a question she hadn't known she needed to ask. That night, Sophie fell asleep on the couch again around 10. The fever had broken completely, but exhaustion pulled her under mid-sentence. Her small body finally surrendering to rest it had been fighting all day. Michael carried her to her room, moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this countless times. The apartment fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic on the street below. Rachel stood by the window watching snowflakes accumulate on the fire escape. The metal rails had disappeared under white, transforming rust and practicality into something almost beautiful. Behind her, she heard Michael return. His footsteps were quiet on the hardwood. She's out. Fever's gone. She'll be okay. The relief in his voice was palpable. Rachel turned to face him. Good. They stood there in the dim light from the kitchen, two people who'd known each other for hours that somehow felt like more. The space between them contained something Rachel couldn't name. Not quite intimacy, not quite friendship, something new that hadn't formed its shape yet. You can sleep in my room. I'll take the couch. Michael gestured toward the hallway. I just want you to be comfortable. I'm comfortable. Rachel mentioned it, In this small apartment with its secondhand furniture and homemade decorations, she felt more at ease than she had in her penthouse in months, maybe years. Michael nodded, didn't argue, just moved to the small linen closet and pulled out blankets, a pillow. Made up the couch with the efficiency of someone who'd slept there before. Probably many times, leaving the beds for Sophie and whatever ghosts still occupied the space his wife used to fill. Rachel helped without being asked. Tucked the fitted sheet around cushions that had seen better days. Fluffed the pillow that was flat from use. Small domestic tasks she'd forgotten how to do, or maybe had never learned. Her mother had done these things when Rachel was young. Then college dorms with their industrial sheets. Then the penthouse where a cleaning service changed linens she barely noticed. When the couch was ready, neither of them moved toward sleep. The apartment felt suspended somehow, caught between Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, between what had been and what might come next. Do you want tea? Coffee? Michael's offer was tentative, like he wasn't sure what came next either, like maybe they were both improvising. Tea would be good. He filled a kettle at the sink. The sound of water running was loud in the quiet apartment. Rachel noticed things she'd missed before. The calendar on the fridge marked with Sophie's school events in different colored pens. The row of coffee mugs hanging from hooks, none of them matching. A drawing taped to the wall near the phone, another one of Sophie's, this one showing what looked like a house with 3 windows and a door painted red. The kettle whistled. Michael poured water over tea bags in mismatched mugs, one with a faded Red Sox logo, one that said, "World's Best Dad" in chipped letters. He handed Rachel the Red Sox mug. They sat at the small kitchen table. 2 chairs pulled close because the table wasn't big enough for distance. Steam rose from the tea, curling in the air between them. Can I ask you something? Michael's fingers wrapped around his mug. Since we apparently threw all normal dating rules out about 3 hours ago, I figure we can ask anything now. Why did you say yes to the blind date? He was quiet for a moment, considering. Or maybe just deciding how much truth to risk this late at night, this far into whatever this was becoming. Linda's been asking for 2 years. Every few months, she'd mention someone. A friend from work. Her cousin's sister. Someone she thought might be good for me. I always said no. What changed? Sophie asked when I was going to be happy again. Michael's voice dropped lower, became something rougher. She didn't ask if, she asked when, like happiness was something scheduled, something that would arrive if we just waited long enough. And I realized she'd been watching me pretend for 3 years, watching me go through motions without believing in them. 7 years old and she knew I was lying. Rachel set her mug down carefully. So you said yes to Linda. I said yes because my daughter thought it was her job to fix me, and that wasn't fair to her. Outside, a car passed. Its headlights swept across the ceiling, creating shadows that moved and disappeared. The momentary brightness made the apartment seem even smaller, more intimate, when darkness returned. What about you? Michael leaned forward slightly. Linda said you run a company, that you're successful, that you could probably buy this entire building if you wanted, so why say yes to a blind date with a plumber? Rachel could have deflected, could have given him the sanitized version, but it was late and she was tired of performing, tired of being the version of herself that board meetings and business deals required. My husband left 4 months ago. He was sleeping with someone from his company. 28 years old, beautiful, uncomplicated. The words tasted bitter. He said I was always working, always planning, that I'd forgotten how to just be present. And he wasn't wrong. Is that why you stayed in the cafe? I stayed because for 15 years I've been the person who leaves first, who walks away, who's always 10 steps ahead of everyone else. Rachel's hands tightened around the warm ceramic. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of running, I forgot what I was running toward. Michael reached across the table. His hand covered hers, calloused fingers against her smooth skin. The contrast was stark. His hands built things, fixed things, worked until they ached. Her hands signed papers, typed emails, gestured during presentations, but rarely touched anything real. I'm scared. His admission came quiet, vulnerable. I'm scared of messing this up, of not being enough, of you waking up tomorrow and realizing you made a mistake, That I'm just some guy with a dead wife and a mountain of debt and nothing to offer except good intentions. Rachel turned her hand over, laced her fingers through his. I'm scared too. I'm scared I don't know how to do this. How to be with someone without calculating outcomes, without planning 5 steps ahead, without protecting myself from everything that might hurt. They sat like that for a long time, hands linked on a scarred kitchen table in a Dorchester apartment, while snow fell outside and Christmas morning crept closer. Neither of them had answers. Neither of them knew what would happen when the sun came up. But for now, for this moment stolen between yesterday and tomorrow, it was enough to sit together and admit fear without shame. Somewhere around 2 a.m., Michael showed her the drawings. He kept them in a folder in the narrow closet by the front door. Architectural sketches on graph paper, detailed floor plans, elevations and cross-sections drawn with the precision of someone who understood how dreams translated into wood and brick and glass. I still draw sometimes. Late at night when Sophie's asleep and the apartment's quiet, I tell myself it's just doodling, just keeping the skills sharp in case I ever go back. He spread several sheets across the table. But really, I'm designing the house I'd build for her, for us. 3 bedrooms because she should have space to grow, kitchen big enough for family dinners, windows positioned to catch morning light, a yard where she could play. Rachel studied the drawings. They were beautiful, not flashy or trying to impress, just thoughtful, every detail considered, every space designed around the people who would live there. This is really good, Michael. You have talent. Talent doesn't pay medical bills. No bitterness in his voice, just fact, just the mathematics of survival he'd been calculating for 3 years. Have you thought about going back to architecture? Every day, but firms want current experience, portfolio from the last 5 years, references from recent projects. Michael gathered the drawings back into their folder. I've been unclogging drains and replacing water heaters. That doesn't translate into residential design credentials. It could, Rachel heard herself say it before fully thinking it through. You're running a business, managing clients, solving problems. Those skills transfer. Maybe, but I can't afford to take entry-level pay while I rebuild. Sophie needs things, school supplies, clothes, medicine when she gets sick. I can't gamble with her stability for my dreams. The way he said it, final, absolute, told Rachel this was an argument he'd had with himself many times. Always reaching the same conclusion. Always choosing his daughter over himself. Always sacrificing what he wanted for what she needed. They talked until Dawn started painting the sky outside gray instead of black. Talked about things that mattered and things that didn't. Michael told her about Diane, how they'd met at an art gallery opening, how she'd loved terrible rom-coms and good coffee, how cancer had stolen her slowly and then all at once. Rachel told him about building her company from nothing, about the 15 years she'd spent proving herself in a world that assumed she was Alexander's secretary until she spoke in meetings. She told him about her father dying when she was 12, about her mother working 3 jobs, about the scholarship to MIT that felt like winning the lottery and the pressure to never fail, never falter, never be anything less than exceptional because too many people had sacrificed too much to get her there. And somehow, sitting in that kitchen while Christmas morning arrived outside, Rachel felt lighter. Not because anything had been solved, but because for the first time in longer than she could remember, someone had listened without trying to fix her, without offering advice or solutions, just listened. When light finally filtered through the window above the sink, Sophie's voice called from her room. Is it Christmas yet? Michael stood, smiled. The exhaustion on his face competed with something that looked almost like peace. Yeah, baby, it's Christmas. Sophie emerged from her bedroom moving slowly, still recovering. But her eyes were bright, fever-free. She wore pajamas covered in snowflakes and her hair stuck up at odd angles. When she saw Rachel still there, still present, her entire face transformed. You stayed. Wonder filled those 2 words. Like Rachel staying was a gift more valuable than anything wrapped under the homemade tree. I stayed. Sophie launched herself at Rachel, arms wrapping tight. Rachel caught her, held her, felt the solid warmth of this small person who'd somehow decided she belonged here. Can we open presents now, Daddy, please? Michael laughed. Let's have breakfast first, then presents. They made pancakes. Rachel helped, following Michael's quiet instructions because she'd never actually made pancakes from scratch before. In her world, breakfast was catered meetings, or room service, or smoothies consumed in the car between appointments. The flour got everywhere. The first two pancakes burned. Sophie thought it was hilarious. They ate in the living room, plates balanced on knees, watching early morning light turn the snow outside golden. The pancakes were lumpy and asymmetrical. Sophie declared them the best she'd ever had. After breakfast, they gathered around the tree. There were only a handful of presents, wrapped in newspaper and tied with string. Sophie distributed them with great ceremony, announcing each recipient like she was hosting an awards show. This one's for Daddy, and this one's for Daddy too, and these are for me. She paused, looking at the empty space under the tree. I don't have anything for Miss Rachel. I didn't know she was coming. That's okay, sweetie. I didn't bring anything either. But Sophie was already moving, running to her room on feet that barely made sound. She returned holding something carefully wrapped in plastic. I made this yesterday, before I got really sick. Daddy helped me wrap it after you left to go on your date. She held it out to Rachel with both hands. Reverent, important. Rachel took the small package, unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a cookie, heart-shaped, decorated with red frosting, and written in Sophie's careful, shaky letters. Thank you for waiting. The words hit Rachel like physical force. Air left her lungs, her eyes burned. She couldn't speak, could only hold this cookie a 7-year-old had made for a stranger, thanking her for the simple act of not giving up. Do you like it? Sophie's voice was small, uncertain, needing reassurance that her gift mattered. Rachel pulled Sophie into her lap, buried her face in the little girl's hair, and let herself cry. Not the elegant tears she'd shed at her father's funeral, or her wedding, or any of the other major life events where crying was expected. Ugly crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and honest and long buried. I love it. It's the most perfect gift anyone's ever given me. Sophie's arms wrapped around Rachel's neck. Her voice was muffled against Rachel's shoulder. Don't be sad. It's Christmas. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm happy. These are happy tears. Over Sophie's head, Rachel met Michael's eyes. He was crying too, silent tears tracking down his face. They looked at each other and saw the same thing reflected back. Two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to hope for something beyond survival. They spent the morning together, watched Sophie play with her new crayons. A 64-count box Michael had probably stretched his budget to afford, ate the cookies they'd baked the night before, built a fort out of couch cushions because Sophie requested it and neither adult could find a reason to say no. Around noon, Rachel's phone started buzzing. She'd turned off notifications the night before, but now they flooded in. 17 missed calls, 43 emails, text messages from Linda wanting to know how the date went, from her assistant wanting to confirm Monday's schedule, from board members whose names appeared on her screen like summons. Reality bleeding back in, reminding her that this interlude had to end. I should check these. Rachel stood, moved to the kitchen for privacy, scrolled through messages she should have answered hours ago. Saw one from James Whitmore. Board meeting Monday 2 p.m. Your attendance is mandatory. We need to discuss recent concerns. Recent concerns, that's what he called it. Not your performance or company business, but concerns. Vague and ominous as warning bells she couldn't yet hear. She texted Linda first. Date was good. Really good. Call you later. Then her assistant. I'll be in Monday morning. Clear my schedule through 3. She left James's message unanswered. Let him wait. Let him wonder. Let him feel just a fraction of the uncertainty she'd lived with for 4 months since his son walked out of their marriage and his father started circling like a shark, scenting blood. When she returned to the living room, Michael was reading to Sophie from a book about a mouse who lived in a cathedral. Sophie was curled against his side, eyes half closed, still fighting exhaustion her body was trying to claim. Rachel sat on Sophie's other side. The little girl reached for her hand without looking, without interrupting the story, just grabbed on like it was natural, like Rachel had always been there and always would be. They stayed like that for hours, reading stories, watching movies. Sophie fell asleep during the second film, head pillowed on Rachel's lap. Michael covered her with a blanket but didn't move her. Let her sleep where she'd chosen to be. I have to go back tomorrow. Rachel's voice was quiet. To my real life, my company, the board meeting Monday. I know. Michael's hand found hers again. I knew this was just Christmas. Just one night. What if it wasn't? The question surprised them both. Rachel felt her heart hammering. What if it wasn't just one night? Rachel, look at us. Look at where you're going tomorrow and where I'll be. I'm taking Sophie to the laundromat because our building doesn't have machines. You're going to a boardroom to make decisions at about millions of dollars. Those worlds don't overlap. Maybe they could. Maybe. But maybe you'll wake up tomorrow and realize this was just a fantasy, Christmas magic or whatever, and I'll be the guy you tell stories about at fancy parties. Remember that time I almost dated a plumber? Remember how close I came to throwing my life away? Rachel's free hand reached up to cup his face, made him look at her directly. I've spent 15 years in boardrooms making calculated decisions, weighing risks, protecting myself from anything that might hurt. And you know what all that careful planning got me? A divorce, an empty apartment, a life so successful I forgot to live it. Her thumb traced the line of his jaw. I don't know where this goes. I don't know how to make it work. But I know I'm not ready to walk away. Michael leaned his forehead against hers. Their breath mingled in the space between them. Sophie slept on, oblivious to the future being negotiated above her. I'm not ready either. His voice was rough, raw. But I'm scared, Rachel. I'm so scared of wanting this and losing it, of Sophie getting attached and you deciding it's too complicated, of hoping for something I don't deserve. You deserve everything. Rachel meant it with every atom of her being. You deserve someone who sees you, who knows how hard you work, who understands sacrifice. And if you'll let me, I'd like to try being that person. They kissed then, careful and tentative, and full of everything they hadn't yet said. Not the passionate kiss of movies or romance novels. Something softer, something that tasted like possibility. When they pulled apart, Sophie stirred, mumbled something in her sleep about cookies. They both laughed quietly, careful not to wake her. Rachel left as evening shadows stretched across the floor. She had to go home, change clothes, prepare for Monday. Return to being CEO Rachel Whitmore after 36 hours of just being Rachel. At the door, Michael caught her hand. Come back. When you can. If you can, just come back. I will. She meant it, even though she didn't know how, even though the distance between his world and hers seemed vast as oceans, even though everything about this was impractical and complicated and probably foolish. She would come back. The penthouse felt colder than Rachel remembered. The decorator's Christmas tree looked sterile in the dim light. The marble countertops gleamed with emptiness. Her bedroom, their bedroom, though Alexander had been gone for months, echoed with absence. Rachel showered in the ensuite bathroom that cost more than Michael's annual salary, changed into silk pajamas that cost more than his rent, slipped between sheets with a thread count she couldn't remember but knew was excessive, and missed the lumpy couch in Dorchester with an ache that felt like grief. She didn't sleep, lay awake watching city lights pattern her ceiling, thought about Sophie's cookies still wrapped carefully in her purse, about Michael's drawings folded in their battered folder, about the way it felt to be wanted, not for what she could do or who she knew, but simply for staying. Monday morning arrived too soon. Rachel dressed in armor, power suit from Armani, heels from Louboutin, watch from Cartier. Each piece a reminder of who she was in daylight, away from Christmas magic and small apartments that smelled like cookies. Her driver arrived at 7. Traffic into downtown was light the day after Christmas. Most of the city still on holiday. But not Rachel. Never Rachel. The Whitmore Industries building stood 43 stories above Boston Harbor. Rachel's office occupied the entire top floor. Windows on 3 sides overlooking water and city, desk made from wood reclaimed from a 19th century ship. Art on the walls worth more than most people earned in a decade. She stood at those windows drinking coffee her assistant had prepared exactly how she liked it. looking out at a view she'd earned through sacrifice and determination and work that consumed everything else. Her assistant knocked softly. Board members are arriving. James Whitmore is already in the conference room. Rachel checked her watch. 1:45. James was early, making a point, claiming territory. I'll be there at 2. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of rushing. Wouldn't show up early and deferential and ready to defend herself before accusations had even been made. At exactly 2 o'clock, Rachel walked into the conference room. 7 faces turned toward her. 6 men, 1 woman, all older than Rachel except Patricia Chen, the senior partner who'd been her only reliable ally since the divorce. James Whitmore sat at the head of the table. Rachel's seat technically, but he'd claimed it anyway, making another point, reminding everyone whose family name hung on the building. Rachel, good of you to join us. His voice dripped false courtesy. I trust you had a pleasant holiday? Adequate. Shall we begin? She took the seat opposite him, refused to let him dictate position or tone. The European expansion is on schedule. I have final numbers here. She distributed folders, let them see months of work, projections, contracts, everything needed to prove this decision was sound. They discussed details for 30 minutes. Revenue forecasts, risk assessment, timeline. Rachel answered every question with data she'd memorized. Never stumbled, never hesitated. Then James shifted in his seat, leaned forward with predatory focus. Before we vote, I'd like to address another matter, a personal matter that affects company reputation. Ice formed in Rachel's stomach. She kept her face neutral, professional. I'm not sure what personal matter could be relevant to this meeting. I think you do. James opened his own folder, slid a photograph across the table. Rachel saw herself on a Dorchester street, holding Sophie's hand. Michael beside them, all 3 laughing at something. The photo was grainy, taken from distance with a telephoto lens. Care to explain who these people are? And why the CEO of Whitmore Industries is spending Christmas in one of Boston's rougher neighborhoods? Rachel forced herself to breathe normally, to think clearly through rising anger. My personal life is not company business. It is when it affects our reputation. When clients see our CEO associating with, he paused, let the silence do his work. Questionable individuals. When you make choices that call your judgment into question. Patricia's voice cut through. James, unless Rachel broke laws or ethical guidelines, her personal relationships are irrelevant. Are they? Our CEO dating a plumber with substantial debt? A single father living in subsidized housing? This reflects on all of us. Rachel's hands clenched under the table. His name is Michael Hayes. He's a good man, a better man than most people in this room. I'm sure he's perfectly nice. James's smile was cold, but we have shareholders to consider. Clients who trust us with their investments. They need confidence in leadership, and leadership that makes questionable personal choices creates doubt. The other board members shifted, uncomfortable, not quite meeting Rachel's eyes. She saw the calculation happening, saw them weighing loyalty against self-preservation. I'm calling for a vote this coming Monday, January 6th. Either you end this relationship or we vote on your position as CEO. James delivered the ultimatum like he was discussing lunch orders. Casual, final. You have 7 days to decide what matters more, your career or your charity case. Rachel stood, gathered her folders with hands that didn't shake because she wouldn't give him that satisfaction. This meeting is adjourned. I'll see you all next Monday. She walked out with her head high, made it to her office, closed the door, and only then let herself feel the full weight of what James had just done. Her phone buzzed. Text from Michael. Sophie wants to know if you can come for dinner tomorrow. No pressure, just wanted to ask. Rachel looked at the message. At the window overlooking the city she'd conquered. At the office she'd earned through blood and determination. Then she typed back, I'll be there. Because maybe some things mattered more than board meetings and reputations. Maybe some risks were worth taking even when you couldn't calculate the outcome. Maybe some people were worth fighting for even when fighting meant losing everything else. Rachel spent the week between Christmas and New Year existing in 2 worlds that refused to reconcile. Mornings belonged to Whitmore Industries. Strategy sessions, client calls, damage control on a CFO scandal that had somehow become secondary to her personal life. Evenings belonged to Dorchester. Dinner with Michael and Sophie, homework help, bedtime stories read in a voice that wasn't hers but was becoming familiar. By Friday, January 3rd, the exhaustion showed. Dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. Coffee consumed in quantities that made her assistant worry. A tension in her shoulders that knotted tighter each time she thought about Monday's vote. Patricia Chen cornered her after a meeting on Friday, January 3rd. They stood in the hallway outside the conference room, other board members filing past with carefully averted eyes. "They're going to vote you out. You know that, right? James has been working phones all week. He's got the numbers." Rachel adjusted her grip on the file she was carrying. "I know." "So end it. The relationship. Tell James you've seen sense. We'll spin it as a brief lapse in judgment during a difficult time. Everyone moves on." "Is that what you do?" Patricia's expression tightened. "Rachel, I've been fighting uphill battles in this industry for 20 years. I've made sacrifices you can't imagine. And I'm telling you, this fight isn't worth it. You'll lose your position, your reputation, everything you've built. For what? A man you've known a week?" "For the first time in 15 years, someone sees me. Not my title, not my bank account, just me." Rachel's voice was quiet but firm. "That's worth fighting for. Even if fighting means losing everything else? Maybe everything else isn't worth keeping." Patricia shook her head, walked away, but at the elevator she turned back. "For what it's worth, I'll vote to keep you, but I'm the only one." Friday evening, 3 days before the vote, Rachel arrived at Michael's apartment carrying Thai food and a weariness she couldn't quite shake. Sophie greeted her at the door with a drawing. Another house, this one with 4 windows instead of 3. "I added a window for you in case you want to stay more." The casual way she said it, like Rachel's staying was both dream and inevitability, made something crack in Rachel's chest. Michael took one look at her face and knew. "Sophie, go wash up for dinner." When they were alone in the kitchen, he poured her water she didn't want and waited for her to speak. "Board's voting Monday. James has the numbers to remove me. Because of us. Not a question." Michael had spent 3 years understanding how the world measured worth. He knew exactly how someone like him would be seen by someone like James Whitmore. Because of them. Because they can't imagine life outside their narrow definitions of acceptable. Rachel's hands wrapped around the water glass. "He gave me an ultimatum. End things with you or lose my position. So end it." The words came fast. Too fast, like Michael had been preparing them all week. "Rachel, you've worked 15 years for that job. I'm not worth throwing it away." "Don't," her voice sharpened. "Don't tell me what you're worth. Don't make this decision for me. I'm being practical, realistic. You're CEO of a major company. I unclog toilets. Those facts don't change no matter how much we want them to. Those facts don't define us. They define how the world sees us. And in your world, I'm a liability." Sophie called from the bathroom. "Can I use the purple towel?" Michael called back. "Sure, baby." Then to Rachel, quieter. "We'll talk about this later." Not in front of her. They ate dinner pretending normalcy. Sophie chattered about school starting back Tuesday, about her best friend Emma who was moving to New Jersey, about the book report she had to write on a mouse who lived in a library. Rachel listened and responded and tried not to think about the fact that by Tuesday, by the time school started again, she might not have a company to return to. After Sophie went to bed, they sat on opposite ends of the couch, not touching. The distance between them felt like practice for goodbye. "I can't do this to you." Michael's voice was low, defeated. "Can't watch you give up everything for me and Sophie. Can't be responsible for destroying your life. You're not destroying anything. James is. The board is. A system that measures people by net worth and job titles instead of character." Rachel slid closer. "I'm not giving up anything that matters. I'm choosing what matters." "You say that now, but in 6 months? A year? When you realize what you've lost? Then I'll deal with it. But I won't make decisions based on fear of regret." She took his hand, laced their fingers together. "I'm scared too, Michael, terrified. But I'm more scared of walking away from you than I am of losing a job. He pulled her close. They sat like that for a long time, her head on his shoulder, his arms around her, both of them aware this might be one of their last peaceful moments before everything changed. Saturday morning, January 4th, 2 days before the vote, Alexander appeared at her penthouse door. Rachel opened it to find her ex-husband standing in the hallway looking exactly as he always had. Expensive suit, perfect hair, confidence that came from never having to earn anything. Behind him, the elevator doors were closing. He'd used his old key card to access the building. Security would have called if she'd remembered to revoke his clearance. "We need to talk." He didn't wait for invitation, just walked past her into the apartment he'd once shared, moving through space he no longer had rights to, with the ease of someone who'd never learned boundaries. "You need to leave." Rachel's voice was ice. "You don't live here anymore. You don't get to just show up. I'm trying to help you. My father is going to destroy you Monday, but he'll back down if you give him what he wants." Which is? End the relationship with the plumber. Publicly, make a statement about poor judgment. Then we reconcile. Alexander turned to face her. "We get back together. Show the board we're stable. You keep your position. I come back to the company. Everyone wins. Everyone except me." Think about it rationally, Rachel. We were good together. Not perfect, but functional. We built this company into something. Don't throw it away for some fantasy. His name is Michael. Rachel's anger was cold and controlled. And he's not a fantasy. He's real. More real than anything we had. He's a distraction. A midlife crisis wrapped in working-class nobility. You're romanticizing struggle, playing at being normal. But you're not normal, Rachel. You're exceptional. And you belong with someone who understands that. You cheated on me with your assistant. Don't lecture me about belonging. I made a mistake. I'm trying to fix it. Alexander stepped closer. My father is coming for you, and he won't stop until you're gone. But if we're together, if we present a united front, he'll back off. You'll keep everything, the job, the reputation, the life you've spent 15 years building. In exchange for what? Pretending to love you? Giving up the first honest thing I've had in years? In exchange for keeping your power. Everything else is negotiable. The way he said it, clinical, transactional, reminded Rachel why she'd stopped loving him long before he'd left. If she'd ever loved him at all, instead of loving what he represented, security, status, arrival at a destination her 12-year-old self couldn't have imagined. Get out. Rachel, get out of my home, out of my life, and tell your father I'll see him Monday. Alexander's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. When this blows up, and it will, don't come crying to me. I won't, because unlike you, when I make choices, I stand by them. He left. Rachel locked the door behind him, added revoking his building access to her mental list of tasks. Then she called Michael. I need to see you, now. The urgency in her voice must have registered because he didn't ask questions, just said, come over. Sophie's at a play date. Won't be back for 2 hours. Rachel drove herself for the first time in months, her hands tight on the wheel, Boston traffic a blur around her. She parked on the street outside his building and took the stairs 2 at a time. Michael opened the door before she could knock, pulled her inside, let her stand in the quiet safety of his apartment until her breathing steadied. Alexander came to the penthouse, wants me to get back together with him. Says if I do, James will drop the whole thing. So consider it. Michael's voice was careful. If it saves your career, I don't want to save my career at the cost of my soul. Rachel grabbed his shirt, pulled him close. I want you. I want Sophie. I want this life that's messy and complicated and real. That's what I'm choosing. He kissed her then, not careful or tentative like before, desperate and certain and full of everything they hadn't yet said. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Michael pressed his forehead to hers. Whatever happens Monday, we face it together. Together, Doyle. Rachel repeated it like a promise, like a vow. Sunday afternoon, January 5th, the day before the vote, Linda called with news that made Rachel's blood run cold. It's everywhere. Boston Globe, Herald, social media. Someone leaked photos to the press. Rachel pulled up her laptop. The headline hit her like physical force. Whitmore Industries CEO's secret romance, from boardroom to blue collar. The article was vicious, described Michael as a plumber with crushing debt, mentioned Diane's death in terms that made tragedy sound like character flaw, called Sophie product of a working-class household, like it was diagnosis, questioned Rachel's judgment, her fitness for leadership, her ability to make sound decisions. The comments section was worse. Half the post called her inspiring for dating across class lines. The other half called her foolish, naive, having a breakdown. Someone had found Michael's address, posted photos of the building, speculated about whether Sophie attended public school and what that said about Michael's priorities. Rachel's phone exploded. Texts from board members, clients, journalists. Her assistant sent 14 messages about interview requests. Patricia sent one. This changes the vote. I'm sorry. Rachel forwarded everything to Michael with a message. They went public. It's bad. His response came minutes later. I know. Reporter showed up at my building. Sophie's school called. Other parents are asking questions. Rachel, this is what I was afraid of. My life. My daughter. Being dissected for entertainment. Then another text. Maybe Alexander's right. Maybe this is too much. Rachel grabbed her keys, drove to Dorchester for the second time that day. Found Michael standing in his kitchen, staring at his phone like it was a grenade. Sophie was on the couch, unusually quiet. When she saw Rachel, relief flooded her face. Miss Rachel, why are people saying mean things about Daddy? Rachel knelt beside him, because some people don't understand that what matters is how we treat each other, not how much money we have or what job we do. But they're being mean. They're saying Daddy isn't good enough for you. They're wrong. Your daddy is the best man I know. Sophie threw her arms around Rachel's neck. Don't leave us. Please don't leave because people are mean. I'm not leaving. Rachel held her tight. I promise I'm not going anywhere. Over Sophie's head, she met Michael's eyes, saw fear and love and determination warring in his expression. She mouthed, together. He nodded, together. Monday morning, January 6th, the day of reckoning, arrived with gray skies and freezing rain. Rachel dressed for battle, her best suit, her mother's pearls, shoes that added 3 inches and made her feel like she could face anything. She left the penthouse at 7, didn't bother with her driver, took her own car, felt more in control with her hands on the wheel. The Whitmore Industries building loomed against cloudy sky. Rachel parked in her reserved spot, took the private elevator to the 43rd floor. Her assistant had coffee waiting, files organized, an expression that said she knew what was coming and wished there was a way to stop it. They're gathering now. James has been here since 6. Rachel checked her watch, 9:45. The meeting started at 10. Good. Let him wait. She spent 15 minutes reviewing the European expansion one final time. Not because she needed to, but because focusing on data kept her from thinking about the conversation with Sophie last night, about the little girl asking why people were mean, about Michael's face when he'd said maybe Alexander was right. At exactly 10 o'clock, Rachel walked into the conference room. 7 faces, James at the head, Patricia beside him, expression apologetic. The others arranged like jury ready to deliver verdict they'd decided before trial started. Shall we begin? Rachel took her seat, refused to show weakness, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. James didn't waste time on pleasantries. I'm sure you have all seen the media coverage this weekend. The question before us is simple. Can we trust Rachel Whitmore's judgment when she's making personal decisions that reflect so poorly on this company? My personal decisions are irrelevant to my professional performance. Rachel kept her voice level. Revenue is up. Client retention is highest it's been in 7 years. The European expansion is tracking ahead of schedule. Nothing about my relationship with Michael Hayes affects my ability to lead this company. Everything about your relationship affects this company. Clients are calling, expressing concern. Shareholders are watching. Our stock dropped 3 points this morning. Stock fluctuations happen. They're not based on my dating life. They're based on confidence in leadership. James leaned forward. And when our CEO is photographed in one of Boston's poorest neighborhoods with a man who owes six figures to bill collectors, confidence wavers. He owes money because he paid his wife's medical bills, because he chose love over financial stability. That's not character flaw. That's integrity. It's poor financial planning. One of the other board members spoke up. Thomas something. Rachel couldn't remember his last name and didn't care. It shows lack of judgment, inability to prioritize long-term security over short-term emotion. The same way I showed lack of judgment by increasing your dividend payments 3 years running, by expanding into new markets, by making this company relevant in an industry that was ready to write us off. Rachel's anger was cold and sharp. I've given 15 years to Whitmore Industries, sacrificed my marriage, my personal life, everything, and now you're questioning my judgment because I fell in love with a good man who happens to be working class. We're questioning whether you can separate personal feelings from professional responsibility. James's voice was final. I'm calling for the vote now. All in favor of removing Rachel Whitmore as CEO, raise your hand. 6 hands went up. Only Patricia kept hers down. The room went silent. Rachel looked at the raised hands, looked at faces she'd worked with for years, people whose careers she'd elevated, whose mistakes she'd covered, whose bonuses she'd fought for during lean years. All of them willing to throw her out because she'd chosen love over convenience. Rachel stood, gathered her files with hands that didn't shake because she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. You just made the worst decision this company will ever make, not because I'm irreplaceable, but because you've proven you value appearance over substance, loyalty over performance, class over character. She looked at James. Your son left me because I worked too much, cared too much, gave everything to this company, and you're removing me because I finally found someone who makes me want to work less and care more. That says more about you than it ever will about me. Patricia stood. Rachel, wait. Don't. You voted how you needed to. I understand. Rachel walked to the door, turned back for final words. Michael Hayes is worth 10 of anyone in this room, including me, and I'm done apologizing for knowing that. She left, made it to her office, started packing personal items into boxes her assistant brought without being asked. Photos, awards, the small things that made the space hers. Her phone buzzed. Text from Michael. Sophie fell at school. They're saying possible concussion. I'm at the hospital. I need... Rachel didn't finish reading, just grabbed her coat and ran. Boston Children's Hospital on Longwood Avenue. Rachel had driven past it countless times. Never thought she'd be racing through its doors, searching frantically for signs pointing to emergency. She found Michael in the waiting area. He looked like he had that first night, wet jacket, exhausted eyes, holding himself together by force of will. When he saw her, something in his expression broke. They need $2,000. Deposit before they'll do the CT scan. My insurance doesn't kick in until next month. I switched plans and there's a high and I don't have... I've got it. Rachel pulled out her wallet, found her Amex, walked to the registration desk and solved the problem in 90 seconds. Money she didn't think about because thinking about money was for people who didn't have enough. She'd forgotten that, forgotten what it meant to choose between medical care and rent. Michael was standing when she returned. I'll pay you back, every dollar, I swear. I don't care about the money. Where's Sophie? CT scan, they took her 10 minutes ago. He sat down hard, put his head in his hands. She was playing at recess, fell from the monkey bars, hit her head on frozen ground. Teacher called me. I was at a job in Newton. Took 40 minutes to get here. 40 minutes she was alone, scared, waiting for me. You got here. That's what matters. Rachel sat beside him, took his hand. She's going to be okay. You don't know that. I know she's strong, like her father. They waited. Hospital time moved differently, stretched and compressed simultaneously. Rachel watched families come and go, saw the difference between those who could pay without thinking and those who counted bills with shaking hands, saw herself reflected in both groups and didn't know which one she belonged to anymore. A doctor emerged after 30 minutes that felt like hours. Mr. Hayes, Sophie's fine. Mild concussion. She needs rest. No sports for a week, but she'll be okay. The relief on Michael's face was devastating. Can I see her? Room 3, she's asking for you. They went together, found Sophie in a hospital bed, head bandaged, looking small and scared. When she saw them, tears started. Daddy, I'm sorry I was being careful, but I fell. Baby, it's okay. It's not your fault. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, gathered his daughter close. You're going to be fine. Just a bump. Nothing serious. Miss Rachel came too. Sophie reached for her. Rachel took the small hand in hers. Of course I came. I'll always come when you need me. Promise? The word was heavy, loaded with every insecurity a 7-year-old could feel. Every worry about people leaving, about being too much trouble, about adults who said they'd stay, but didn't. I promise. Rachel meant it with everything she had. You're stuck with me now. Sophie smiled, winced at the pain, but smiled anyway. They stayed at the hospital another 2 hours for observation. Rachel sat in an uncomfortable chair, holding Sophie's hand, while Michael filled out paperwork that asked for information he didn't have and made promises about payment he couldn't keep. When they finally left, evening had arrived. Michael carried Sophie to Rachel's car because his truck was at the job site in Newton. They drove to Dorchester in silence. Sophie dozed against Rachel's coat in the back seat. At the apartment, Michael carried his daughter inside, put her to bed with tenderness that made Rachel's chest ache. When he returned to the living room, he looked like he'd aged a decade. I can't do this. The words came out flat, final. Can't drag you into my life, my problems. Can't watch you sacrifice everything for us. You lost your job today because of me. I lost my job because of James Whitmore, because of a board that couldn't see past class prejudice. That's not on you. It's exactly on me. If we'd never met, I'd still be alone, still be working 80 hours a week, still be pretending success mattered more than happiness. Rachel stepped closer. I'm not giving up anything that has real value. I'm choosing what matters. In 6 months, you'll resent me, resent Sophie. You'll look back and realize what you lost. Stop telling me what I'll feel. Her voice sharpened. Stop deciding this for me. I'm a grown woman who's made billion-dollar decisions. I can decide who I want to love. Love? Michael's voice cracked. Rachel, we've known each other a week. You can't love me. You're just what? Confused? Having a breakdown? Making a mistake? She grabbed his shirt, forced him to look at her. I've spent my entire adult life being careful, calculated, making the smart choice. And you know where it got me? Divorced, alone, running a company for people who never saw me as more than Alexander's wife playing CEO. Her voice dropped lower, steadier. I'm done being careful. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing Sophie. I'm choosing this life that scares me and excites me and feels more real than anything I've had in 15 years. And you don't get to take that choice away from me. Michael's hands came up to frame her face. I'm terrified. Terrified of wanting this and losing it, of not being enough, of you waking up and realizing you settled. Then be terrified with me, but don't push me away because you're scared. They kissed, desperate and certain and full of everything that mattered more than board meetings or reputations or the opinions of people who measured worth in dollars. When they broke apart, Michael was crying. I don't know how to do this, how to be what you need. You already are. Just stay. Don't run. Don't decide what's best for me. Just stay and let me choose you. Okay. He pulled her close, held her like she might disappear. Okay. The next weeks moved in strange patterns. Rachel cleaned out her office, negotiated severance with lawyers who tried to make her sign NDAs she refused, kept her stock, 5% of a company worth $500 million, kept her dignity, lost her title. The media moved on. Found new scandals, new stories. Rachel became footnote, woman who'd thrown away CEO position for love. Some portrayed her as romantic hero, others as cautionary tale. She stopped reading either version. January brought cold that froze the Charles River. Rachel spent mornings in her penthouse trying to figure out who she was without Whitmore Industries defining her. Spent evenings in Dorchester learning who she could become. Michael went back to plumbing, but he also started sketching again. Real designs, houses for real clients. Rachel watched his portfolio grow, saw talent that had been dormant for 3 years wake up and stretch. One night in late January, Sophie asleep in the next room, Michael spread drawings across the small kitchen table. "I've been thinking about what comes next for both of us." He pulled out a sheet of paper. Business plan, rough but solid. "Hayes and Whitmore Consulting. We help small businesses grow. I do design work, spaces that function well. You do business strategy. We charge sliding scale based on what clients can afford. You want to start a company together? Want to build something that matters, not just profitable. Something that helps people like me. People who need expertise but can't afford big consulting firms." Rachel studied the numbers, the projections, saw passion and pragmatism balanced in ways her old company never managed. "We'd be equal partners? Equal everything. Your name goes first alphabetically, but otherwise 50-50. The casual way he said it, like of course they'd be equals, like her experience and his skills had the same value, made something settle in Rachel's chest. "When do we start?" They filed paperwork in February, rented small office space in Jamaica Plain, cheap rent, close to public transit, accessible to clients they wanted to serve. Rachel liquidated investments, put $500,000 into the business. Michael sold his truck, bought something older that ran but looked worse, contributed every dollar he'd managed to save outside his debt payments, $12,000 that represented 3 years of sacrifice. Every penny set aside despite still owing $180,000 to hospitals and collection agencies. Their first client was a restaurant owner in Roxbury. Second was a landscaping company in Dorchester. Third was a woman starting a daycare in Mattapan. Small businesses, working people, clients who paid what they could and worked hard and reminded Rachel why she'd fallen in love with business in the first place. By March, they had 10 clients. By April, 20. Word spread in communities banks ignored and big consulting firms didn't bother with. Hayes and Whitmore became known as a company that cared more about people than profit margins. Rachel's mother called in May. "You sound happy, honey, really happy. Not just saying you're fine, actually happy." "I am, Mom. For the first time in years, I'm happy." Late May, Saturday morning, Michael told Rachel to pack a lunch. They were going out, Sophie included. "Special trip," he said. Wouldn't explain further. They drove to Arnold Arboretum, sprawling park in Jamaica Plain, cherry trees in bloom, families everywhere celebrating spring after brutal winter. Michael spread a blanket under flowering branches. Sophie bounced with excitement she couldn't contain. "Can I give it to her now, Daddy? Can I?" "Not yet, baby. Wait a minute." He poured lemonade from a thermos into paper cups. They ate sandwiches Sophie had helped make. Everything normal until Michael nodded at his daughter. Sophie pulled an envelope from her backpack, handed it to Rachel with ceremony. "I drew you something. Open it." Inside was a drawing, house with 3 bedrooms, big kitchen, backyard with swing. Exactly like drawings Michael had showed Rachel months ago. But at the bottom, Sophie had added words in her careful printing. "Our family house." Rachel looked up. Michael was kneeling beside the blanket. In his hands was a small box. "Rachel Whitmore, 6 months ago I walked into a cafe 47 minutes late, soaking wet, completely certain I'd ruined any chance. But you waited, and you've been waiting ever since. Waiting through my fear, through my doubt, through scandal and board meetings and me trying to push you away for your own good." His hand shook slightly. "I don't have much to offer. I'm still paying down debt. Still driving a truck held together with duct tape and prayer. Still living in a 2-bedroom apartment I can barely afford. But I can offer you this. A home, a family, a partnership built on honesty instead of convenience, and my whole heart for as long as you'll have it." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but real. "Will you marry me?" Sophie added in rushed whisper. "Please say yes. I really want you to be my mom." Rachel was crying, ugly crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and couldn't be contained. She pulled Sophie into her lap, reached for Michael with her free hand. Yes, God, yes, 1,000 times yes. Michael slipped the ring on her finger. Simple silver that caught sunlight and looked more valuable than diamonds. Sophie screamed with joy, threw her arms around both of them. They collapsed onto the blanket in a tangle of limbs and laughter and tears. Around them, other families smiled. Some applauded. But Rachel barely noticed. She was too busy holding the two people who'd taught her that success wasn't about corner offices or Forbes lists. It was about finding people worth staying for. September arrived with cooler air and leaves starting to turn. Rachel stood in front of a mirror in the small dressing room at Old North Church. Linda adjusted her veil. Patricia was there too, had come despite everything, despite the awkwardness, because some friendships survive bored betrayals. You look beautiful. Linda's eyes were wet. I knew that night, when you called from his apartment on Christmas, I knew this was different. You were right about him, about me needing something real. Rachel smoothed the simple white dress, $500 from a boutique in Cambridge. Nothing designer, nothing trying to impress, just a dress that made her feel like herself. The church was small, 50 people, Michael's co-workers, Sophie's classmates and their parents, Rachel's mother crying in the front row, her brother who'd flown in from California, Linda and Patricia, a handful of former colleagues who'd reached out after everything, who'd chosen friendship over corporate loyalty, no one from Whitmore Industries. Rachel hadn't invited them, didn't need their validation, didn't want their blessing. Sophie appeared in her flower girl dress, yellow like sunshine, crown of real flowers woven through her hair. Miss Rachel, Mom. The word still felt new, tentative, but right. But, are you ready? Daddy is nervous. He's been pacing for 20 minutes. Tell him I'll be there in 2 minutes. Sophie left. Linda gave Rachel's hand one final squeeze. Last chance to run. Not running, not anymore. Rachel walked down the aisle alone. No one to give her away because she'd given herself. Chose this freely, without calculation or concern for what others thought. Michael stood at the front in a suit he'd bought secondhand but had tailored to fit. When he saw her, his whole face transformed. Love and wonder and disbelief that this was really happening. Sophie stood beside him. Official witness, part of this union from the beginning. The ceremony was short. Traditional vows neither of them wanted to rewrite because the old words said exactly what they meant. Love, honor, cherish, till death. Simple promises that meant everything. When the pastor said Michael could kiss his bride, he did, gentle and certain, a promise of beginning rather than ending. They walked out together into September sunshine. Hayes' family of 3. Rachel had kept her name professionally but added his personally. Became Rachel Whitmore Hayes in spaces that mattered, in the home they were building. The house in Jamaica Plain was small, 3 bedrooms like Michael had designed, kitchen big enough for family dinners, windows positioned to catch morning light, yard where Sophie could play. Michael had designed every detail. Rachel had funded construction. They'd built it together. Partnership in everything. Sophie's room had yellow walls, window seat overlooking the backyard, bookshelves Michael had made by hand. Rachel had helped paint, got more on herself than the walls. But Sophie loved it. The master bedroom had a small office space, desk for 2, his architectural drawings on one side, her business plans on the other. Hayes and Whitmore Consulting had grown to 40 clients, 3 employees, revenue that meant they were surviving, not wealthy but stable, building something that mattered. Their wedding night, after reception ended and guests left, the 3 of them sat on their new couch in their new living room, Sophie between them, exactly where she belonged. Are we really a family now? Sophie looked between them, still needing reassurance, still afraid someone might leave. Really and truly, Rachel pulled her close. You're stuck with me forever. Good, because I picked you and I'm good at picking. Michael laughed, pulled them both close. They sat like that while evening darkened the windows and their new home settled around them. Rachel thought about her office on the 43rd floor, about views of Boston Harbor, about power she'd spent 15 years acquiring and then willingly set aside. None of it mattered. Not compared to this. She'd traded everything she thought she wanted for everything she didn't know she needed, lost a company, found a family, gave up control, gained partnership, stopped running 10 steps ahead, and learned to walk beside people who matched her pace. Outside, the swing Michael built moved slightly in evening breeze, waiting for tomorrow, for Sophie to claim it again. For this life they were building one day at a time to continue unfolding in ways they couldn't predict, but no longer feared. Rachel closed her eyes, let herself be present, let herself be happy, let herself be enough exactly as she was, not CEO, not power player, not woman who measured worth in achievements. Just Rachel, wife, mother, partner, human. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything.